paper hit the streets of Bridgeport this week called the Bridgeport Light. With it comes the promise to lift much of the darkness the city has been shrouded in for some time now. Well, please welcome today the associate editor of this enterprising new endeavor. His name is Bob Fredericks, and nice having you here.
Thank you.
Now, you've been described, I'm going to read this right here. Lenny Grimaldi, who's the publisher of the paper. Fredericks will be floating in and out of the neighborhoods, spotlighting what is right, uncovering injustice, and helping us set editorial policy.
Be a big S on your chest.
That's what I was going to say.
Truth, justice, and the American way.
There you are.
But we should be a little bit more serious. We were going through the first page of the newspaper, and no holds barred. It appears that Cop Shop of Horrors, and this is not just on the front page, it continues this way through the rest of the newspaper.
Bridgeport is a rough and tumble town, and our paper is going to be a reflection of the community. It is going to be an aggressive paper. It's going to reflect the diversity of the community and also the colorful spirit of the community.
Well, you mentioned the aggressiveness at one point during this publication, and this came out Wednesday, we should add. You called for the resignation of the police superintendent. And
Yes.
in fact, that happened later that day. How much power does this paper have?
Well, we like to think that the superintendent heard we were calling for his resignation and couldn't stand the pressure, but in all honesty, I think it was a combination of things. It was pressure from all sides. His family was urging him to resign. Politicians were calling for his head. He was under the gun. He has been superintendent for 27 years. He was 72 years old. His health isn't what it used to be. I think it was just the right time for him to go. And he recognized that.
This is a weekly newspaper.
Yes,
Is that
it is.
correct? We ought to clarify everything, because that's why calling for the resignation and the thing coming out the same day, that's why it was like that.
Well, our deadline was Monday evening.
Right.
We got a call from a source late Monday evening saying that it looked as if the superintendent would resign on Wednesday. We were able to get an insert into our paper saying that sources said he would be resigning on Wednesday to cover ourselves. But that's going to happen with a weekly newspaper when it comes out a day or two after your deadline.
Why is there a need for another paper in the area? It seems that Post Telegram's around, and Fairfield Advocate gets in there too, and so forth.
Well, David, as you know, both of those papers are regional papers. We felt that there was in Bridgeport a void, a news void, and we hope to fill that void. We are covering Bridgeport exclusively. We are devoted entirely to Bridgeport, its people, and its neighborhoods. And we felt there was a need, and we felt there was a time, and the reaction we're getting, the response we're getting from the community, from the business community, has been excellent so far.
You really, you point out that there's a little bit of tension between the city of Bridgeport and the suburbs.
Yes.
And this is going to be directly geared to the city itself. What is that? What is the tension that exists there?
Well, I think the tension is based on the fact that Bridgeport provides a number of services to the suburbs. The hospitals serve the suburban communities. The trash-to-energy plant accepts garbage from the suburbs. We provide the bulk of the housing for low and moderate income families in Fairfield County, and yet the suburbs have been traditionally unwilling to share in the burden of providing these types of services.
During the paper, you mentioned you called, and we clarified that about the police superintendent. You go through the headline article here is having to do with the police department, and this follows through. Most of the newspaper seems to be focused on the police department. Was that your original intent to?
Well, no, our intent is to be responsive to the news in the community, and it just so happens that in the past few weeks the police department has been at the center of the storm, involving overtime spending, involving a lack of police coverage in the neighborhoods. There is a report, a consultant's report coming out next week that is a detailed management study of the police department. So it just so happened that this particular week the police department, as I said, was at the center of the storm. But we will be covering whatever the issues are, whatever they happen to be, we will be covering them in depth.
Is there a political viewpoint to this newspaper?
We are an independent newspaper. No, we have no favoritism towards any political party or individual. We are going to be an independent newspaper.
There is also some emphasis on some feature articles having to do with the different neighborhoods in the city. What are you finding as you're going from neighborhood to neighborhood? Is there a common thread you see that identifies these neighborhoods as specifically Bridgeport?
Well, the neighborhoods are very diverse. It's a reflection of the diversity of the community. There are 40 or 50 ethnic groups living in Bridgeport, sizable communities. But there are also some common threads, including a lack of confidence in the police department, which we brought out in our investigative article on the police department. And overall, there's a disenchantment with the level of city services in Bridgeport. There's a terrible abandoned car problem, an illegal dumping problem. Taxes are too high. So yeah, there are some common issues that are of concern throughout the city.
What do you see as the way that Bridgeport can really turn itself around? What is the principal problem that has to be accomplished in order to get a turnaround going, to get people more optimistic, to get the morale of everybody up, and to solve these problems?
That's a tough question, David. A few years ago, there seemed as if Bridgeport's attitude was turning around. There were some cultural events. For example, the New York Philharmonic came and performed during the summer at Seaside Park, which attracted thousands of people from throughout Fairfield County. There were new buildings going up downtown and opening up. That seems to have subsided in the past couple of years. I think a turnaround will have to begin with economic development. I think when people see cranes and bulldozers in the downtown area putting up a new building, that gives them a sense that something is happening. Also, I think perhaps a reduction of the crime problem. Perhaps there's a perception now that it's a terribly unsafe city, where statistically it's safer than New Haven and Hartford. Most people would be surprised to hear. I think perhaps a greater police presence in the neighborhoods will correct that image.
Are most supporters from this area know Bridgeport?
Myself, I'm born and raised in Bridgeport. Our managing editor, Jim Callahan, has been a reporter in Bridgeport for about 15 years. Our publisher, Len Grimaldi, has been a journalist in Bridgeport for about 10 years. We have a lot of experience covering Bridgeport.
Well, hopefully the news you have to report on will improve, because it's been a tough year.
Well, we hope it won't be all bad.
That's right. It's been a pleasure having you with us
Thank you.
today, Bob. It is
Thanks very much.
interesting. And it is the Bridgeport Light, and you'll be seeing a lot of it in the future. And we've got more coming up, so stay with us.
First paragraph. We blasted Dennis's proposal to build the wall, and then I found I've even met more people. I know some people that I've never met before. I'm over there, like little businesses, people that lived in Bridgeport, and they started their own business and things like that. And, you know, people are very happy about this. So that's been my experience. You know.
Bob, what's your gossip?
The journalists and people seem to like that. Right.
It took me a little while to. I was so excited when I first came.
I think it's too quiet here.
And now I feel hard to keep but I feel a little better now. We need two.
That's what Lenny said last night. It's too quiet here. I said I love it.
I know. I'm afraid I want the radio to come back.
Baroque.
It's so quiet. It's so quiet.
It won't be, though. Give it a couple weeks.
Well,
We don't have people screaming through there.
Everybody's busy as well. You're busy learning to use the computer. It's hard to carry on a running dialogue with someone. You got the manual to the terminal back
I
and forth.
appreciate the quiet coming from being right near the fire headquarters, and then the maniac Stanley outside screaming and penetrating through into my office. And,
We'll get the police scanner next week and we'll turn it
all
on.
right.
I would say for typewriters, you know.
I'm supposed to act natural or something?
Yeah, that was fine.
Newtown, so